Hello, Heathens. Welcome to the Bloodcast. Today we're going to talk about another god of Norse mythology. And we're sitting today again by the fire because even though he's a frost giant, he's often connected with fire and flames. And he's often depicted as mischievous, evil, but a cunning god. And this picture of him is often a bit too black and white for my taste, and I think there lies a deeper meaning behind this character. He is a frost giant, as I said, a blood brother of Odin, has 2 sons with the goddess and 3 monsters with the giantess, and he is the mother to a horse. If that sounds interesting to you, I think we should talk about that, shall we? Of course, every one of you know who I'm talking about. It's Loki, the god of mischief. He is born of 2 giants and is the bringer of Ragnarok. Let's first take a look into his name and the meaning of it. The etymology of the name Loki has been extensively debated. The name has at its time been associated with the Old Norse word logi, meaning flame. But this is debated in scientific community. But I will make a certain case for that later, because I think Loki is associated with flame, and that heavily, and I don't think that he's the evil frost giant that we all think of. Another widely accepted translation is the Scandinavian variants of the name. These conclude the Faroese Loki, Danish Lokemand, Norwegian Loke, and Loke with 2K, and the Swedish Loki and Loku. These variants suggest origins in the Germanic root luk, which relates to loops. This encompasses knots, hooks, closed spaces, and locks. This linguistic connection is illustrated in terms such as the Swedish lokenat and the Faroese lokanet, which both mean cobweb, and are literally translated as Loki's web. Additionally, in Faroese terms like Grindaloki and Grindalokur refer to daddy longlegs, a certain spider. A similar usage is seen in Swedish, Lokespindla, again the word for the spider's daddy longlegs. In various poems from the Poetic Edda, Loki is alternatively referred to as Loptr, which is generally considered derived from Old Norse lopt, meaning air, and therefore points to an association with the air, of course. Kvetrungr is another name that is only given to us through kennings again. For those of you who don't know what kennings is a usage of words in stories when you try to disguise the word you're talking about. Like when I would talk about Odin, I would call him in a kenning the one-eyed god. And so everybody would know who the one-eyed god is, that I'm talking about Odin. But we're talking about the name of Loki. Kvetrungr, and this name comes from a kenning for his daughter Hel, because Hel is one time called Kvetrungr's daughter, and we know that Loki is her father, so we found another name for him. And this name can be translated into something like the roarer, or somebody who roars. Lodr. Lodr, this name is linked to various Old Norse words such as lod, meaning fruit or land, ljutr, meaning people, and lada, meaning to attract. The Gothic words liodan means to grow, and laudi means to shape, as well as the Germanic word lodern, meaning to blaze, have also been mentioned in this context. And we read from the Völuspá where this name Lodr actually comes from. Until there came 3 mighty and benevolent Aesir to the world from their assembly. They found the earth nearly powerless, Usk and Embla, void of destiny. Spirit they possessed not, sense they had not, blood nor motive powers, nor goodly color. Spirit gave Odin, sense gave Hönir, blood gave Lodr, and goodly color. I hinted about this name in my latest episode about Odin, that in one of the stories, Odin's brothers aren't called Vili and Ve, but Hönir and Lodr. and Lodir is actually a name of Loki. And a bit later in the script here, I will show you a connection from one of the two brothers of Loki to Odin. As we see, from the names alone, we can get a lot of connections that we can read into. Let's just recap them here shortly. The first one is an association with flame or fire, like in the name Logi and in the name Loder. Then there is the association with spiders, knots, and bindings, which could be a connection to the binding of Loki after his crimes against the gods later in the Edda. I actually researched if Loki is the one that gets the binding for Fenrir, the Fenris wolf, that is called Gleipnir, from the dwarves, but I couldn't find him in the sources. The gods just sent a messenger to get this magical binding, so that the world-devouring wolf could be bound in Asgard. The next association from Loki is air, from the name Lopt. The only thing that I can connect this with is that Loki is a shapeshifter. He can shape into various animals, and one of them is actually a fly. I want to make this script a bit livelier for you guys, and so I decided to read some of the stories of the Edda in which Loki plays a significant role. So after every chapter of me researching and telling you some facts, I will paraphrase from one of those stories. And we start with the fortification of Asgard from the Prose Edda. A giant smith offered to build a protective wall around Asgard, home of the Aesir gods, to shield them from their enemies. He requested a hefty price for his task, the hand of the goddess Freya and the son of the moon. Loki proposed that the builder could have his request if he could complete the walls in just one winter with only his horse to help. The gods agreed, thinking the task would be impossible. Surprisingly, the wall neared completion quickly, aided significantly by the giant's strong horse Svadifari. With only 3 days left and the wall almost finished, the gods, fearing they would lose Freya and the celestial bodies, threatened Loki with death unless he thwarted the giant's efforts. That night, Loki transformed into a mare, lured Svadifari away, leaving the giant unable to finish the wall. The next morning, with the wall incomplete, the gods dispatched the giant with a fatal blow from Thor's hammer. Meanwhile, Loki, as a mare, gave birth to Sleipnir, an 8-legged horse that would become Odin's steed. Well, what is to say about this story? First and foremost, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Loki can shapeshift, and he can do that into even another gender. And, like here in this story, he turns himself into a mare, so a female horse. And he even can be impregnated in this state, which is odd, but we are talking about gods here, so nothing is off the table, I think. The interesting part here is that this child has 8 legs, not 4, which is again a connection to spiders, because only spiders have 8 legs. And there's even one theory of one scientist that connects Loki to an older cult of a spider god, but I didn't put it in the script, so I just leave it to be like this. We have to remember, here we are talking about the gods in their pinnacle form in the Edda, a form that has changed over hundreds and even thousands of years. There are a lot of entities that are combined in these later gods, in these later states of the gods, like when I talked about Odin in my last episode. So there are a lot of gods and entities that through similar traits are combined in the Aesir gods. That's what I'm trying to say. Now let's talk about the findings. Are there any archaeological findings of Loki? And yes, there are, of course. The first one is the Kirby-Stephen stone and the Gosforth cross, a fragmentary late 10th century cross located in St. Stephen's Church, Kirby-Stephen, Cumbria, England, features a Bond figure with horns and a beard. This figure is sometimes theorized as depicting the bound Loki. Discovered in 1870, the stone consists of yellowish-white sandstone and now sits at the front of the Kirby-Stephen Church, which is odd, I think, to have a pagan or heathen god in front of your church. But anyway, a depiction of a similar horned and round-shouldered god was discovered in Gainford County, Durham, and is now housed in the Durham Cathedral Library. The mid-11th century Gosford cross has been interpreted as featuring various figures from Norse mythology, and, like the Kirby Stevens stone, is also located in Cumbria. The bottom portion of the west side of the cross features a depiction of a long-haired female kneeling figure holding an object above another person, a bound figure. Above and to their left is a knotted serpent. This has been interpreted as Sigyn soothing the bound Loki, like in one of the stories. The other finding would be the Snaptune stone. The Snaptune stone may feature a depiction of Loki. In the 1950s, a semicircular flat stone featuring a depiction of a mustache face was discovered on a beach near Snaptune, Denmark. Made out of soapstone that originated in Norway or Sweden, the depiction was carved around the year 1000 CE, so after Christ, and features a face with scarred lips. This figure is identified as Loki due to his lips considered a reference to a tale recorded in the Skaldskaparmál where sons of Ivaldi stitched up Loki's lips. This stone is actually a hearthstone, so it would be used in smithing and smithing purposes, and so according to Hans-Jørgen Madsen, the Snaptune stone is the most beautiful made hearthstone that is known. The stone is housed and on display at the Møsgard Museum near Aarhus, Denmark. Now we come to the next story. Do you know how the gods got most of their magical artifacts? Well, now we read about the creation of Thor's hammer. One day, Loki, in a mischievous mood, cut off the golden hair of Thor's wife Sif. An enraged Thor threatened to break Loki's bones unless he fixed his deed. Loki went to the dwarven realm Svartalfheim, where the sons of Ivaldi crafted a new set of golden hair for Sif, along with two magical items, Skidbladnir, the best chip that can be folded and stored in a pocket, and Gungnir, a spear that never misses its target. While in the dwarven realm, Loki, stirred by his trickster nature, challenged the dwarf brothers Brokkr and Sindre to create 3 items superior to those made by their brothers, wagering his own head. Brokkr and Sindre accepted, and despite Loki's attempts to sabotage the work by transforming into a fly and pestering them, they successfully forged 3 extraordinary treasures. Gulimbusti, a boar with golden bristles that could illuminate the darkness and outrun any horse, Draupnir, a ring that produces 8 copies of itself every night, and Mjolnir, a powerful hammer with a short handle that would always return to its wielder. Loki returned to Asgard and presented these gifts, Sif's new hair, then Mjolnir to Thor, Draupnir and Gungnir to Odin, and Skidbladnir and Gulimbusti to Freyr. Despite the gods' delight, especially with Mjolnir, they ruled that Loki still owed his head to the dwarves for his bet. When Brokkr and Sindre came to collect, the story leaves off with them approaching Loki with knife in hand. But we know that Loki didn't lose his head in that story, and of course he could talk himself out of it this occasion. But the dwarven left him with another gift, so to say, because they stitched up his mouth with golden thread, so he would shut up for a while. The story is very interesting for me. We see here Loki's modus operandi, so the way he acts out in most of the stories. Guided by his mischievous intents, he cuts off the hair of the wife of Thor and needs to repay his deeds. So he travels to the dwarves and actually managed to get out of this occasion 6 magical and powerful artifacts. 6 magical artifacts. And of course, he is not thanked for this in any way. But the gods became much stronger this day. Especially the weapons for Odin and Thor gave them a massive advantage in several occasions. And maybe that was all Loki's intention. Maybe he knew the outcome that would bring the theft of Sif's hair. Let's look into the family of Loki. As I indicated at the beginning, Loki's family is actually quite large, and so let's start with his parents. The first one is his father, Farbauti. The Old Norse name for Bauti has been translated as dangerous striker, anger striker, or sudden striker. It is composed, it's a compound formed with the noun far attached to the verb baut. Far meaning hostile, danger, or falseness, and baut meaning to strike. The mother of Loki is called Laufey. The meaning of the Old Norse word Laufey is not clear, but is generally taken to be related to lauf, meaning leaf or foliage, perhaps attached to the female suffix a. And both of the parents of Loki are attested in several kennings from different poets, so I won't go into these because the script is long this time and we march on. So now we know that the father of Loki is the dangerous striker or the sudden striker. When we think about a natural phenomenon, the only sudden strike that occurs is the lightning strike. So the mother of Loki is a nature giantess that is associated by name to leaves or foliage. So could the lightning struck the dried leaves to ignite something, to give birth to something? Maybe. Let's read about Loki's brothers. He has two, and maybe we'll find additional clues about Loki's origin. The first brother is called Helblindi. He's a Jotun in Norse mythology. According to the 30th century poet Snorri Sturluson, and he's the brother of Loki. The Old Norse name Helblindi has been translated as Hellblind. Helblindi is also one of the many names of the god Odin, as found in the Grimnismal and in the Grimnismal. And in the Grimnismal we read, he, Odin, called himself by various other names on his visit to King Geirrod. I call myself Grim, Ganglari, Herian, and Helblindi. Isn't that something? When I talked about the names of Loki, Odin's name came up as well. And now we have the same thing here, that Helblindi is also a name of Odin. But let us not focus on that for now. I will talk about that 2 points down my script. So let's focus first on the name that is given here, Hel and Blindi. Hell can of course be associated with the Christian hell, but I don't think that's the right translation here. Even worse would be to suggest that this name has anything to do with the daughter of Loki, which has the same name, Hel, just with one L. No, Hel in German or in Scandinavian languages means bright, clear, or luminous. So the name of the brother of Loki could be translated to blinded by the light, blinded by something that is bright. And this could either be a reference to his father as the lightning strike or to Loki as the light bringer or flame bringer. Let us have a look at the other brother of Loki. He is called Bileister. It's also a Jotun of Norse mythology. And the meaning of the Old Norse word Beilstr is uncertain. The most popular proposition are compounds formed with the word bil, meaning storm, or either as Billeistir, storm relieving, Bileipter, storm flesher, or Bilheister, violent storm. Well, and this fits perfectly in the picture again of this natural phenomenon idea with the giants. We have the lightning strike, the dry foliage, Loki the flame, the violent storm that accompanies the lightning, and probably the youngest brother who was blinded by this whole occasion, by this birth process, or however you want to call it. And in my research, I actually found a scientist that has basically the same theory. His name is Axel Koch, not with C, with a K, and he has proposed Farbauti's name and character may have been inspired by the observation of the natural phenomenon surrounding the appearance of wildfire. If Farbauti, as the dangerous striker, refers to lightning, the figure would appear to be part of an early nature myth alluding to wildfire, Loki, being produced by lightning, Farbauti, striking dry tinder such as leaves, Laufey, his mother, or pine needles. Enough of that. Let's talk about Odin. He is called the blood brother of Loki. And I finally actually found something in a poem called Lokisenna, the flighting of Loki from the Poetic Edda, where Loki states to Odin, when he is not invited to the hall of the gods, and nor meat or a place is assigned to him, he says to Odin, "Do you remember, Odin, when in bygone days we mixed our blood together? You said you would never drink ale unless it were brought to both of us." Maybe there is something more behind that. Maybe not a blood brother, but a brother by blood. We know now that one of the brothers of Loki, Helblindi, is actually a name that was used by Odin himself. And on Odin's side, we have one of his brothers called Lodr, which is then a name of Loki. This is actually insane, I think. And I think it isn't talked about enough. Odin and Loki are heavily intertwined with each other. And in Odin's story, Loki is the one that gives humanity their blood, or goodly color, as it's written down. I don't know if you had this situation in your life, but when you're sitting in front of a fire, your skin gets irritated by that and it gets rosy or red through the heat. So I think here is again an implication of Loki's association with fire. And in Loki's story about his brother, we have Helblindi, as I said, and this is a name of Odin, and we know that Odin blinded himself in one of his eyes in his approach to wisdom. Really fascinating topic, and I could go on and on about this, but I think we shall continue with my script and we talk about the wives or women in Loki's life. The first one is Sigyn. Sigyn is a Aesir. She's a goddess, and her name means something like friend of victory. But not a lot is described about her, just that she's the wife of Loki, but not about her associations or her powers or anything like that. So let's just leave that here. The other woman in Loki's life is Angerboda. The Old Norse name Angerboda has been translated as the one who brings grief, she who offers sorrow, or simply the harm bidder. The first element is related to the English word anger, but means sorrow or regret in Old Norse. The later meaning is retained in Scandinavian languages. In Norwegian and Danish, the word is rendered as anger, while Icelandic and Faroese has angur, and Swedish onger. The second element, boda, is conjugate with the English word bode, as in this not bode well. And she's a giantess, and with her, of course, he has the monsters Hel, Fenrir, and Jormungandr. Now let's talk about the children's. With Sigyn, he has two sons, Nari and Vali. And they both will meet a tragic ending at the dawn of Ragnarok. And I think they kill each other to use one of them to bind Loki or something like this. Pretty wild stuff. But let's focus on these monsters, these beasts that Loki fathered with the giantess. The first one is the Fenris wolf. I talked about him in this episode, last episode about Odin, because he's the one that actually swallows and probably kills Odin. The next one is Jormungandr. Jormungandr is the sea serpent. It's a gigantic snake that encircles the whole world and bites in his own tail. And the last one is Hel. Hel is not a monster in any means. She's the daughter of Loki, and she's actually a woman, a young woman, but her face is split in two sides, one dark and one light. And the gods, when they see her the first time, they know that she is an evil being. You can't tell it otherwise. That she is an evil being. That's why she is expelled from Asgard into Helheim, the world, one of the 9 worlds that is actually called after her. And the last part of Loki's family, if you want to call it like that, is of course Sleipnir. I talked about him in the previous story. Sleipnir is a horse with 8 legs, and it's the horse of Odin. And yes, Loki is its mother. Sounds strange, because it is. The next story I want to share with you is sometimes called Thor the Transvestite or Thor in Drag. So let's read this little story. One morning, Thor discovered his powerful hammer Mjolnir missing. Suspecting it was stolen by giants, Thor, in a panic due to Asgard's vulnerability without his weapon, enlisted the help of Loki. Freya provided him with falcon feathers, allowing Loki to transform and swiftly search for the hammer. In Jotunheim, Loki reverted to his godly form, confronted the giant chief Thrym, who admitted to stealing Mjolnir and burying it deep underground. Thrym demanded Freya's hand in marriage as ransom for the hammer. Back in Asgard, the gods devised a plan proposed by Heimdall. Thor would disguise himself as Freya and travel to Jotunheim to reclaim Mjolnir. Despite initial resistance, of course, Thor agreed to the plan to prevent the giants from overtaking Asgard. Dressed as a bride, Thor, accompanied by Loki as his maiden servant, journeyed to the giants' realm. During the wedding feast, Thor, unable to curb his appetite, consumed massive quantities of food and drink, arousing Thrym's suspicion. Loki cleverly explained away Thor's behavior as nervous eagerness for the marriage. When Thrym attempted to kiss the veiled bride, he was startled by Thor's fierce eyes, which Loki attributed to love-induced sleeplessness. As the wedding ceremony progressed, Thrym called for Mjolnir to bless the union. Once the hammer was placed in Thor's lap, he seized it, revealing his true identity, and swiftly dispatched Thrym and the other giants, then returned victoriously to Asgard, resuming his true form. I know there is an underlying story here that could be interesting in the eyes of modern society, but please let us not go there. Let us focus on Loki and his tasks in this story. The gods obviously trust him, and the gods obviously trust him in the story and entrust him with the search of the hammer, and even to be the handmaiden or the maid servant of Thor in the story. He even helps to explain why the beardly bride has such an appetite and such fierce eyes. Why would you task a god of mischief with such an important duty? It doesn't fit the picture. And this is what is depicted in a lot of tales, that when something is going wrong, the gods can always rely on Loki. The next point in my script is a bit of a one-off because I fitted everything in there that I couldn't put anywhere else, so please excuse this. I call it associations. Of course I do. First things first, let's start with his appearance. The sources called him, Loki, thin and fair. He's even called one time the fairest of all gods. And from the sources, some experts try to make an argument that Loki's hair could be blonde, but that's not accepted by everybody. And I don't know why I always think of him as red-haired. Maybe because of his descendants from giants, which were often depicted with fiery red hair. And he is described as beautiful and cunning. Well, that makes sense. He's a shapeshifter after all, and why not use your appearance as your advantage? While we, at the shapeshifting part, we know that he can transform into a snake, a fly, and into a salmon. And of course, you can make a strong argument for him to be able to turn himself into a spider. He's associated with fire, with masks, and with fishing nets. That comes, of course, from his name, especially in Scandinavian, where his name is often used for knots, webs, and the description of spiders. There is even a star that is named after him. It's called Loka or Loka. And it's not any star that he is called about. It's not any star that is called after him in Norse. It is the brightest of them all. It's the Sirius star. And the Sirius star is the morning star. And that could lead us to an association with Lucifer, the morning star. But let us not get ahead of ourselves. The next thing I wondered was if Loki has any artifacts or weapons associated with him, like Thor with his hammer and belt and gloves, or Odin with his ring and spear. Does Loki have something similar? And I found something that is curious, let's put it like that. In the Poetic Edda, there is a weapon of swords described that is crafted by Loki himself. It's called Levatein, and it's not quite sure what kind of weapon it truly is. Some experts speak of a dart or arrow, some talk about a flaming sword, and others talk about a staff, like a magic staff. And it's even sometimes called the Wand of Destruction. So what are we going to do with this information? There is a lot to unpack here. First and foremost, I want to talk about the name of this weapon. It is very similar to the Christian demon that accompanies the apocalypse, called the Leviathan. And the Leviathan is a serpent or a dragon that helps with the apocalypse. Loki, as the father of the sea serpent Jormungandr, fits perfectly in this theory, because when Ragnarok arrives, the sea serpent plays a pivotal part in the destruction of the world. Another thing that this weapon another thing about this weapon that stood out to me was its shape-shifting nature. It is like its wielder. This weapon could change in everything that the wielder needed in this moment. The last association I want to describe is with Loki and one of the other giants. But I think it's best when I read to you the story about this certain giant. The tale of Utgarda Loki. Thor discovered his hammer Mjolnir missing, like in most of the stories, and rendering Asgard vulnerable. Suspecting giants, he and Loki set out to Jotunheim, the giant's home. They stood at a farmer's house along the way where Thor's magical goats were killed for dinner, but resurrected the next day, though one was left lame because the farmer's son, Thjalfi, broke a bone to suck the marrow out. Thor, Loki, and Thjalfi, and the farmer's daughters, Roskva, continued their journey to Jotunheim, where they spent a night in a large hall that turned out to be the glove of a giant named Skrymir. Skrymir joined their journey, proving to be an immense and seemingly unkillable creature who brushed off Thor's attempt to kill him in his sleep. Eventually, reaching the castle of Utgard Loki, the travelers were challenged to various contests. Loki competed in an eating contest against Logi, who devoured not only the meat but also the bones and the throw itself. Thjalfi raced against Hugi, Thought, who was soundly beaten. Thor failed to empty a drinking horn, which was secretly connected to the sea, and could not lift Utgard Loki's cat, which was actually the Midgard serpent in disguise. And Thor couldn't defeat an old hag in a wrestling match, because she was time itself. The final contest. Right. After spending the night, Utgard Loki revealed that the contests were illusions, meant to humble the visitors. The opponents were elemental forces and mythical creatures. Admitting defeat, Thor and his companions were mystically expelled, finding the castle vanished and replaced by an empty plain as they departed. The story ends with the words of Utgard Loki. I shall tell you the truth. Now you are out of my castle, and if I live and have a say, you shall never enter again. And I would indeed never have let you in if I had known your strength beforehand. And you were very close to bringing us a great disaster. You see, I cast delusions on you, so that it was I who met you at first in the forest. And when you tried to untie the bag, I tied it with a magical wire, and you did not find out how to untie it. And when you drank from the horn and threw it slow to sink, I dare say that it was a miracle I had not expected to be possible. The far end of the horn was submerged in the sea, but you did not see that. Now, when you come to the shore, you will see what kind of sip you drank from the sea. There is now a sandy beach where there used to be water. This story is much longer than what I described now. There's actually the bag of Skrimnir, which is Utgard Loki in disguise, which was tied so tightly that Thor couldn't open it up. And this is actually my favorite story in all of Norse literature. The journey of the three, the overpowering magic of the giants, and the consequences that their tasks had. I was always wondering why especially Loki did not acknowledge the king of Utgard, he's a giant himself, and did not acknowledge that his name being Loki as well. We know that the castle of the giant's king is called Utgard, which can be translated in something like Outlands or Outer Yard. Another name that is associated with the giant is Skrimnir, as we know, which can be translated into something like the Big Talker or the Great Talker. Again, very similar to our god of mischiefs, don't you think? So, why is the king of all giants called Utgard Loki? It doesn't seem to make any sense. But I have one theory that I would like to share. Maybe the name of the giant is after his castle, or the castle after the giant, so his name is Utgard. And the epithet could be something like a title, like in the name of Genghis Khan, Khan meaning leader. Maybe it's an honorable title to be a Loki. That's just my theory. I did not find anything about this idea, but I was just curious why is the name of the giants called like that? Anyway, two tales intertwined. We are closing in on the end of my script, and we still need to talk about the end of our cunning god, and this end has 3 chapters. The first one is the death of Baldur. Baldur, beloved son of Odin and Frigg, began having ominous dreams of misfortune. Odin consulted a seers in the underworld who revealed that Baldur was fated to die soon. In an attempt to protect him, Frigg obtained promises from everything in the cosmos not to harm her son, except for one seemingly harmless mistletoe. The gods playfully tested Baldur's invulnerability by throwing objects at him, which harmlessly bounced off. Loki, seizing an opportunity for mischief, discovered the exception of the mistletoe. He crafted a spear or arrow from it and tricked the blind god Hodr into throwing or shooting it at Baldur, which fatally wounded him. This tragic event foretold the beginning of Ragnarok, the end of the cosmos. Frigg sent Hermod, another son of Odin, to plead with Hel, the goddess of death, for Baldur's return. Hel agreed to release Baldur if all things wept for him. However, the giantess Tok, who was actually Loki in disguise, refused, condemning Baldur to remain in Hel's realm. The gods mourned deeply as they conducted a grand funeral for Baldur, with his body and that of his wife Nanna sent to sea on a burning ship. Despite the universe's grief, Loki's trickery ensured that Baldur could not return, leaving his light and joy absent from the world of the living. Chapter 2: The Binding of Loki. After causing Baldur's death and ensuring his confinement in the underworld, Loki intensified his slander against the gods. Fed up, the gods sought to capture him. Loki fled to a remote mountain, building a house with 4 doors to watch for his pursuers, and transformed into a salmon by day to hide in a nearby waterfall. Odin discovered Loki's refuge, prompting the gods to close in. Realizing they were near, Loki hid again as a salmon in the stream, discarding his fishing net into the fire. The gods deducted his form that remains of the net. No, the gods deducted his form from the remains of the net, right? Crafting their own, and attempted to catch him. After narrowly escaping several attempts, Loki was finally caught by Thor during a daring leap downstream. The gods then subjected Loki to a harsh punishment. In a cave, they turned one of his sons into a wolf who killed his brother and whose entrails were used to bind Loki to rocks. Above him, a venomous snake dripped poison onto his face. Loki's wife Sigyn tried to catch the venom into a bowl, but whenever she emptied it, the drops caused Loki immense pain, manifesting as earthquakes and tsunamis. This torment is destined to continue until Loki breaks free at Ragnarok, helping to bring about the end of the cosmos. A little caveat for you in the story. Thor was the one that captured Loki in a disguise as a salmon, and he gripped him with such might that after that day, every salmon would have a little dent in their back. I find it funny. Just wanted to share it with you. Chapter 3, Ragnarok. In the last chapter is of course about Ragnarok. The sun and moon will lose the race and will be devoured by wolves. In this final battle of gods, Loki will slip from his chains and allies himself with the fire giants of Muspelheim. He even steers the ship of the giants, Naglfar, the nail ship, and navigates the sons of Muspel to the shores of Asgard. There he will find his final battle against the guardian of Asgard, the watcher of worlds himself, Heimdall. About their battle, there is nothing much in the scriptures, but I'm sure that not a lot of words were exchanged between those two. We read one poem from Ulfr Uggason, the famed rainbow's defender, ready in wisdom, strife at Singarstein with Loki, Farbauti's sin-sly offspring, the son of mothers 8 and 1, mighty in wrath, possesses the stone ere Loki commendeth. I make no songs or praise. And of course, it had to be Loki to face Heimdall, because he was the only one that could distract him with a proper fight so that the fire giants could seize Asgard. In this final battle, like in most of the other battles, both contestants die by the hand of each other. And this is the end of our cunning, mischievous god who fulfilled his purpose, who fulfilled his destiny to bring a paradigm shift into the worlds of the gods. In the writing of the poet, we hear about a certain stone, the Singarstein, so the singing stone, and most of the experts think that it is the location where the two fought. But some argue that it could be something they fought over. Maybe the singing stone is the object that opens up the Rainbow Bridge to Asgard. But this is just a theory, and I just wanted to put it here because I found it interesting in my research. Epilogue or conclusion. Well then, we have heard a lot about Loki, and there are many more tales about him. And in most of them, he's actually a valuable asset for the gods. He's helping them in all sorts of manners, and in some stories, he's even a friend of mankind. So why is it that most heathen and pagans in the community, and most people that talked about the topic, wouldn't dare to pray to him or to call upon his skills in their personal life? I don't think that is fair. And as we know now that Loki is the fairest of all gods, let's dive into my conclusion a bit deeper. I think Loki is a very special entity in the northern tales, and he's different to any other figure that is described, because Loki is one of the constant powers in these tales. What do I mean by that? In every story of one of the protagonists, Loki is most of the time not very far. And even in the tales where he isn't mentioned by name, we could assume that he also plays a part in them, like in the binding of Fenrir I talked about earlier, or the visit of Mimir's well by Odin, who whispered in Odin's ear that there is a giant that is the wisest of all beings, even wiser than Odin himself. And in most of the tales of Odin, he's right on his side, every step of the way. Why is that? He gives the gods their weapons, he helps to save Freya several times. His actions are often questionable, but most of the time not evil. I think of Loki as an agent of destiny. He has an intrinsic motivation to keep the wheels of time spinning so that life can go on. There is a certain plan underlying here that he follows. Where he gets this plan from, I'm not quite sure, but it's just in every fiber of his being to fulfill this plan of destiny. He places doubt in Odin so that he isn't sure about the outcome of Ragnarök. He maybe orchestrated the struggle of Thor in the castle of Utgard-Loki. Thor was defeated in arm wrestling, in drinking, and in weightlifting, all aspects of him that he was sure about. But Loki placed doubt in him, that doubt that maybe led to his death against the world serpent. If you read the Edda several times, the picture of Loki turns from an antagonist to a protagonist. He is the one that makes sure that the age of gods ends, so that the age of humanity can flourish. And he sacrificed everything for that. His children, his wife, and in the end, as we know, his life as well. He's a tragic figure, a figure that lives by his own standards, his own morals, and he wouldn't give in for anything to achieve his goals. And there is another aspect we can talk about now, and it's the similarities between Lucifer and him. Lucifer was an angel, a highly regarded one by angels and God. In the story of Lucifer, we can find a lot of similarities to Loki. The shape-shifting aspect. The devil is often called the Lords of the Fly, and Loki can transform into a fly, as he showed in one of the tales where he angered one of the dwarves. Then there is the fire aspect. I think when we think about Lucifer or the devil, we always think about him with flame associated with him or accompanying him. Then there is the name of the morning star, which in Norse mythology is Loki's star or Loki's flame. And then there is his weapon, the Leviathan or Leviatine. Where was I? Then there is his weapon, the Leviatine, which was a demon under the devil's command, the Leviathan. And there is his fight against the guardian of Asgard. And Heimdall, for me I think, has a lot of associations with the Christian heaven. We have his horn, the Gjallard horn, and what is the first sound that warns humanity about the apocalypse? It's the horns of Jericho. And Heimdall has a very special connection to humanity. He's called the father of all tribes because he fathered a lot of children with human women, and these children will become the heroes in the tales, and after their death, they will become the warriors in Valhalla. So, what is my final conclusion about Loki? I suggest that we have some sympathy for the devil. The devil is not inherently evil. He punishes the sinners. Like Loki isn't evil in the tales. He's just someone who pushes the story forward. The gods want to live in their paradise and with all their might for eternity, but that isn't suitable in this universe. Change is the only constant in this universe, and even the gods must change. So I invite you to rethink this figure of Loki, and I have a suggestion for you how and when you can call upon him. Loki is an agent of destiny, as I said, an agent of change. And if you feel stuck in your life and can't see an escape from that, I would advise you to call upon him. He will bring change, no doubt about that. And sometimes change can be hard. But this is not the fault of Loki. it's because of us, because we allowed stagnation in our life. And to break through the stagnation, pain and suffering is often of the essence. And after the hardship, we are on the right track again in our life. If we take the route of change with Loki on our side. Now we are finally at the end of my script, and the last thing for me is to say goodbye. I hope you all enjoyed this episode about the retribution of Loki. I would be interested if you learned something new in this episode, and maybe your view on Loki, or maybe I could change the view on Loki a bit. I could alter it a bit in some way. Please let me know either through Instagram, YouTube, or via mail at theblogcast@gmail.com. And as always, know you are loved. You are able to love because you are loved. Thank you so much for listening.